Just a quick disclaimer, I've got a bit of a cold at the moment and I don't feel the best, so throughout this video you'll probably hear some sniffles and all that kind of shazazz that comes with a cold. Wanted to make this video on schedule even if it did sound a bit strange at times. Anyway, I'll let you get into the video. When you look into the corner of your room, it's pitch black, the lights are out, your mind spirals. What's there? What's in that dark space? If you're a young aspiring star, you're probably worried it's Drake in the corner of your room. And of course, as an adult and as a normal child, there are multiple other things that you can fear to be in the corner of your room. But one thing that is shared in common between all of these instances is the fear of the unknown. And this premise of the fear of the unknown is not just limited to the corner of your room. For example, the biggest case of the unknown is deep sea and deep space. We can't naturally go there, and it's so dark down there and up in the sky in space that it's impossible to really see. And so that unknown fear lingers in the back of our minds. This fear was perfectly encapsulated by H.P. Lovecraft. His work centred around beings beyond mortal comprehension that we couldn't possibly understand. Our minds were just too feeble. His incredible short stories and his amazing world would go on to inspire multiple other pieces of fiction. One of the more recent examples was Bloodborne. Bloodborne tackles in many ways the great old ones, the outer gods, and their own term, the great ones. The game is all about trying to understand the incomprehensible, and in some ways you do. But there's a game that I really think has been overlooked in its relation to H.P. Lovecraft, and some other really dark shit which is hidden within the stars of Elden Ring. Before we get started with the video, I just wanted to say, if and only if at the end of the video you have enjoyed, please consider leaving a like and subscribe as it greatly helps the channel and it lets me know that this style of content is something you want to see. Without any further dilly-daddling, please sit back, relax, grab some succulent, juicy, tender and sensational prawns if you want, and enjoy. Everything began with the One Great. The One Great was the progenitor of all things, but at some point the One Great split off, creating the Outer Gods. Whether this was an intentional decision or it was forced upon it is completely unknown, but its offsprings would violate the natural order, bringing in thoughts, feelings and consciousness to the world that we would later inhabit, known as the Lands Between, and all that exists within its universe. The time before consciousness seems to have very much been a primordial cooking pot for chaos. I cannot help but notice the similarities between the One Great and Azathoth. Azathoth is the beginning of all things inside of H.P. Lovecraft's world. He is the progenitor, the lord of all things. His throne lies at the centre of ultimate chaos. Let's list off the similarities. First of all, both the One Great and Azathoth are at the top of the food chain. They are the ones that everything descends from. Secondly, they both seem very much far removed from the idea of consciousness. Inside of Elden Ring, consciousness only came about once the One Great offsprings created it, far removing it from the idea of consciousness. Although it's not exactly the same, Azathoth is also disconnected from consciousness. Azathoth is lulled to sleep by Flute, and is referred to as the blind idiot god. My interpretation of this isn't that it's just an idiot, that it's unintelligent. I think it's more likely that it's so far removed from the idea of consciousness that it simply just does not have one. Or at least not in a way that we mortals would perceive it. Now there are more outer godly references, for example Sub-Niggurath, that I want to talk about further into the video, but for now I want to talk about some more stuff to do with the stars. For example, the meteors. I truly believe that meteors are a way to enact the influence of the outer gods. Every single time a meteor crashes into the Lands Between, something cataclysmic or important happens. A great example is the giant meteor that hit the centre of Elden Ring's map. When it crashed into the centre of the map, it led to a mass extinction event, and it led to so many other creatures coming about, for example the Claymen and the Onyx Lords. The Onyx Lords and the Alabaster Lords wield gravity magic, which, as we know from Mattia's boss fight, who uses a similar thing, it is heavily related to space. kind of suggesting that whatever entity brought this meteor into the lands between was in fact doing it with some purpose to influence the world. Now, whether or not that was to destroy it, to help it, to cultivate something, is really unknown. But it is shown time and time again that these outer gods, although they are beyond human comprehension, love to mess with the business of mortals, and this is an absolutely great example of that. The entity that sent this meteor is completely unknown, but there are a few other events inside of Elden Ring where meteors crash into the ground, resulting in star beasts and things like a stele that really make it seem like it was probably the same thing. Now, I just said that I didn't know who it could be, and I was absolutely bullshitting you, so I'm going to spread those cheeks wide open and spit the truth into them. I can never pronounce this guy's name, but it's called the Nightreign. I put the name on the screen because I cannot pronounce it for shit. This outer god is the offspring of Azathoth and is an outer god. It is also known as the soul and messenger of the outer gods. And this fits in very nicely with the fact these meteors seem to have some relation to the outer gods. We can't pick which one it is, but if he is the messenger of the outer gods, then perhaps these meteors are a message to the domain of the greater will. AKA, stop fucking about and stop changing the natural order. Nightreign also enjoys tormenting humans. It is a malevolent being. Sending down meteors slow and steady with short bursts is a surefire way to slow down and tire humans and beings within the lands between. If you just send one big meteor, that's fine, that destroys them and extincts them. But short little bursts? Well, that's going to inflict a lot of psychological damage. And from everything we see from this guy in H.P. Lovecraft's work, maximum pain equals the goal achieved. I love Radahn. Now, a lot of people are probably going, oh yeah, of course you love Radahn. Pretty much everyone does. He's an absolute badass. But there is so much more to him. Radahn was taught gravity magic by sorcerers in Celia upon the stairs. The sorcerer that so happened to teach him was an Alabaster Lord, a race of people that came about after that giant meteor we were just talking about. General Radahn's legacy after we fight him is that the stars come undone. For millennia he held them back. All the meteors that were coming down or trying to come down from the outer gods were halted. He held back the stars, quite literally. The truth of the outer gods and the meteors was most likely taught to him by his Alabaster Lord Master. This shows that although they are a race derived from the outer gods and one that utilises the power of the stars and cosmos, they do not hold the outer gods in high esteem, or at least those in Celia Understairs don't. There's another really interesting point that comes of this, and that's Ranni. Now, in Ranni's quest line, you need to kill Radahn to make sure the stars come back into motion. A byproduct of this is all the meteors come just flying across, and it ends up creating this crater inside the ground which leads to the Eternal City. Ranni's plan and ending cannot come about without the help of us, without us killing Radahn. This suggests multiple possibilities, and I think the most likely is Ranni was never honest with us. And this is no surprise. I mean, she quite literally kills her half-brother and leads to a war of untold casualties and suffering. So is it any wonder that her actions in her ending are anything but pure? I don't believe she's pure evil, of course, because no one in Elden Ring is pure evil, but I definitely would say she's one of the secret antagonists. A most likely answer for what on earth she's doing is these moon deities that her and the Carian families are actually communicating with might be manipulating them to try and get them to do exactly what Ranni did. AKA, maybe these moon deities are the guy who is sending these asteroids and meteors down onto the lands between. And if this is the case, it would also further prove the idea that Radahn knew about all of this, for he is part Carian himself, and if he did know all about the moons and their true nature, it would also explain why he didn't follow their path, and instead took more after Godfrey. I really love the storyline between Radahn and the Alabaster Lords, and I think this is just the cherry on top, at least for me personally. Shub-Niggurath is a perverted, fertile deity from H.P. Lovecraft's work. And the similarities between Shub-Niggurath and the Formless Mother are actually quite convincing. But before we go on to that, I do just want to say, Formless Mother, well, it's got no form, that doesn't make any sense. How can they be similar? Well, in the DLC we find a talisman that is related to the Outer Gods, and it's found next to worshippers of the Formless Mother. The talisman talks about the lore of an Outer God, and how this clan suffered great fires. Upon losing everything, they looked upon their corpse of their ancestor, and what once stood as an act of sanctity now stood as a twisted deity. My interpretation of this was always that this deity, the Formless Mother, was a pure being at one point in time, where her body was then burnt and it resulted in what we now know as the Formless Mother. And when I say body, I don't actually mean her actual body, as she's an outer god, a being beyond mortal comprehension. I doubt this is actually going to be her body, because outer gods, from everything we know, can't just be killed. It just doesn't make any sense, since they are so far removed from it. What I more mean is a physical representation. Now, inside of H.P. Lovecraft's work, there is a lot of talk of avatars, and inside of Elden Ring, we do see this. For if you look at things like the Scarlet Rot Scorpion, you'll actually see it seems very much likely it is a manifestation of the Rot Outer God. When you add this thought into the Blood Fiends, everything makes quite a lot of sense, for the Blood Fiends are very, very strange in their appearance. Shub-Niggurath is known to devour her loyal followers and turn them into immortal, satyr-like beings. If Shub-Niggurath's physical manifestation, her avatar, was then to have children and have descendants, they would definitely look very strange, perhaps explaining the weird look we see with these beaver-like, bat-like blood fiends. But it doesn't end there, for if we go off this theory, we now have an origin for the omens, which has stumped a lot of people, myself included, for a really long time. We're never exactly told why the Formless Mother decides to contact Mohg in the depths of the capital. She's also known as the Mother, the All-Mother. Sound familiar? Formless Mother? If you then take into consideration the omens have very much satyr-like appearance, not to mention the fact that the omens in some ways are immortal, that being they cannot be returned to the Erdtree and are instead taken away from the cycle, leading to this pseudo-immortality. This really nicely explains why the Formless Mother took such a liking to Mohg. Further proof of this comes with Morgott. Now Morgott, you see, when you reach his phase 2, he gets this blood fire on the end of his sword. This is eerily similar to what the Blood Fiends and Mohg use. This is something given to them by the Formless Mother, and although it says kind of given, I think it's more likely, considering Morgott having it and the fact he's such a Golden Order fanatic, it's more likely that it's something intrinsic to them. I find it really ironic that Morgott, if he wished it, truly would have had a mother, no matter how twisted, if he truly desired it. Instead, he clung to Marika's shoes. You thought we were done, but we're not done. We are not done, because I want to talk more about the Primeval Current. The Primeval Current is sort of known as the beginning of glintstone sorcery. The Primeval Current is basically textbook cosmic horror. When Azor looked into the Primeval Current, he saw darkness and was both bewitched and fearful of the abyss. There's a saying that I think really encapsulates that line. When you stare into the abyss stares back. There's a lot of this kind of talk of cosmic horror elements, and not to mention the stars falling. When Lusat gazed into the Primeval Current, he beheld the very final moments of a star cluster, and when he saw it, he too was broken. The important word here being too. This suggests that those that look into the Primeval Current lose themselves to madness, which is something that happens a lot inside of H.P. Lovecraft's work. If you then look at Azure, where we find him, he is broken. He's basically a piece of broccoli. And we can assume this is what happens when you gaze into the abyss and you gaze into what your feeble minds shouldn't possibly understand. The fact that glintstone sorcery in its primeval form is in fact related to this cosmic horror element and the outer gods makes so much sense, for glintstone needs intelligence. Perhaps in Elden Ring's world, intelligence is also another way to be able to comprehend what shouldn't be comprehended. Hence, the most powerful of the Carian bloodline are able to communicate with the moon, which is probably an outer god in of itself. Something I also find really interesting is Selene calls us children of the stars, and so that we one day might be returned to them? Whoa. Are you saying that we have actually come from a meteor? We, life, have come from the stars? And I think this could be interpreted in multiple ways. Either our species, the ones we see in the lands between, do actually come from space, or in my opinion the most likely, Selene realises the outer gods are probably responsible for creating us, so refers to space as where we come from. The whole turning into crystal balls thing is really trippy, and also very much HP Lovecraft and cosmic horror-esque. You transcend your mortal form into this hideous form that is capable of understanding the incomprehensible, at least to some extent. I absolutely love it. A Sorcery of Stars of Rain talks about how the stars' ambers fell upon the world. This is most likely the foundation of glintstone sorcery and the glintstone crystals which are used to actually perform the sorceries of glintstone magic. The star amber and those that are responsible for it dropping upon the lands between has been around for a really long time. We see glintstone crystals deep underneath the lands between, so far down in fact that it's quite likely that it predates the Golden Order, Placidux's age and so much more. How the star amber got there is quite important, and I think it's quite simple when you look at it like this. You see, this giant star cluster must have hit somehow, for how are these star ambers actually coming down to the lands between? I think the most likely explanation is in fact these star clusters were the big meteor that hit the middle of the map. This would explain why the primeval glintstone sorcerer was so terrified when he glimpsed into the primeval current and saw this cataclysmic event, knowing the power and destruction that the outer gods were capable of, and by proxy that he could do absolutely nothing to stop it if it was to ever happen again. When it says that they sort of gazed into this primeval current and what they saw became real, I think it's more the fact they gazed into it and then discovered what was already beneath their feet. There are so many cosmic horror elements to From Software's games, and more specifically Elden Ring, and it's been a pleasure to talk about it in today's video. If you did enjoy, please consider leaving a like and subscribe, as it greatly helps the channel and it lets me know you're enjoying this style of content. I'm not going to try and ramble any longer. I do just want to say there is a Discord channel that I've been putting the wrong link for some reason. It's sort of got this edit bit at the end, and it was putting some server that I've never heard of into my descriptions. But now the proper one is there, so if you want to join, please come say hello. And yeah, I'm not going to ramble anymore. Please friends, don't you dare go hollow, and may you find your worth in the waking world. I'll see you in the next one, and goodbye.